The market was loud, hot, and full of strange smells. Humans and aliens walked past food stalls, junk dealers, and loud traders. But one man moved slowly. With tired eyes and an empty stomach, his name was Jace, and he had only 3 credits left in his pocket. He was about to leave when he saw something strange. A dirty cage stood near the edge of the market, hidden between tall meat crates. People walked past it without looking, like it wasn't even there. But Jace stopped, because 2 small glowing eyes stared back at him. Inside the cage were 2 alien girls. They looked like humans but had soft fur on their ears, small fangs, and long cat-like tails. One girl was older, maybe 16 in human years, with white hair and gold eyes. The other was younger, shaking and holding the older one's arm tightly. "What is this?" Jace asked the butcher beside the cage. The butcher laughed and wiped his bloody hands on his apron. "Fresh meat," he said. "Rare breed, high price. You can smell the quality." Jace frowned. "They're alive," the butcher shrugged. "Only for a while. Some rich clients like it fresh." Jace felt his chest grow tight. He didn't know these girls, but their scared faces wouldn't leave his mind. They were not just meat, not just things. They were afraid, and no one cared. "How much?" Jace asked suddenly. The butcher looked at him like he was crazy. "You want to buy them?" "With what money?" Jace pulled out his last 3 credits and held them out. The butcher laughed again. "You'll get 1 leg for that." But Jace didn't move. He just stared into the butcher's eyes, silent and firm. Something about his look made the butcher stop laughing. He grunted, snatched the credits, and unlocked the cage. "Fine, take the small one," he said. "She's not fat anyway." But Jace reached in and pulled both girls out quickly. "Hey!" The butcher shouted, but Jace was already walking away. People looked, but no one stopped him. The girls didn't speak, didn't cry. They just clung to his arms. Their eyes were wide, like they couldn't believe what was happening. Back at his tiny room in the lower city, Jace gave them food and water. They didn't eat much, just stared at the walls and at him. The younger girl finally took a bite and whispered, "Warm." It was the first time he heard her voice. The older one said nothing, but her tail wrapped around her sister protectively. Jace didn't ask questions. He knew they were not normal pets and not just animals. They were someone's creation, sold like meat. He hated it. But the galaxy was full of things like this. Still, he couldn't walk away, not this time. That night, he sat on the floor while the girls curled up on his bed. He didn't sleep, his mind full of questions. Who made them? Who sold them? Would someone come looking for them? A soft scratching sound came from the door. Jace stood up quickly, thinking someone had followed him. But it was the younger girl, awake and staring at him with glowing blue eyes. She was scared, her tail shaking. She walked up to him and said, "You." "Not like them." Jace nodded, unsure what to say. The girl touched his hand. "They hurt us, all the time, bad places, dark rooms." Her voice was small, broken, but full of pain. Jace clenched his fists, feeling angry. "Who are they?" he asked, but she shook her head and whispered, "They will come." Jace looked toward the door, his heart racing. "Who will come?" he asked again. The older girl suddenly sat up, eyes sharp and glowing gold. She looked at him and finally spoke. "Thank you for saving us," she said. "But now, you are in danger too." Jace felt a chill run down his back. He didn't know what he had stepped into, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let them go back to that cage. No matter who came knocking, the morning light barely touched the rusted walls of Jace's room when he woke up with a sharp breath. He looked around quickly, half expecting soldiers or bounty hunters to be waiting with guns raised. But the room was quiet, except for the sound of breathing. The 2 alien girls were curled up beside each other on the bed, their tails wrapped around their legs like cats in winter. They looked peaceful now, but he remembered their words from the night before. "They will come," the younger one had said. And the older had warned, "You are in danger too." Jace sat beside them and whispered, "What did they do to you?" Neither girl answered, but the older one opened her golden eyes. For a long moment, she just stared at him, like she was trying to decide something. Then, slowly she reached behind her neck and pulled aside her long white hair. There, just under the fur, was a strange mark, glowing, metallic, and pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Jace leaned closer, careful not to startle her. It wasn't a tattoo or a scar, it looked like a chip fused into the skin. He had seen things like that before during his time in the lower colonies. Tracker implants, but this one had strange shapes around it, almost like alien letters. The older girl whispered, "This is why they want us." The younger one sat up suddenly and pointed to the mark, her voice tiny. "They say we were made, not born." Jace froze, his mouth slightly open. Made? What did that mean? "We don't know everything," the older one said, "but we remember pain." She looked down at her hands, the fingers thin but strong. "Lights, wires, cages, and tests. So many tests." Jace asked gently, "Do you have names?" The younger one tilted her head, then said, "They called me Luma." The older girl answered after a pause, "My name was Aaron." Suddenly, a sharp beep came from the small screen near the door. Jace turned toward it quickly, fear tightening his chest. It was an alert from the city grid, a warning about 2 lost experimental units escaping from Sector 8. The screen showed a photo, grainy but clear enough. It was them. Jace cursed under his breath and shut the screen off. Someone had reported them already. He grabbed his jacket and looked at the girls. "We have to move," he said, "now." But before he could step outside, there was a knock, a polite knock, 3 slow taps. One fast, then another slow. It was too calm, too careful. Jace reached for his small blaster under the table and pressed a finger to his lips. The girls hid behind the old supply crates. Eyes wide and glowing in the dark, he opened the door just a little, enough to see a tall man in a gray uniform. The man smiled. "Good morning, sir. I'm from the city shelter unit. We got reports of dangerous stray pets in this sector." Jace blinked, trying to act confused. "I don't own pets," he lied. "Only bugs in the walls." The man chuckled, but his eyes didn't match his smile. "Mind if I take a look inside?" "Just standard procedure." Jace shook his head. "I do mind." The man's hand moved slowly toward his belt. That's when a sound cut through the room. Sharp and low, a growl. Luma stepped out from behind the crates, her eyes glowing bright blue. Her small claws were out, her lips pulled back slightly. The man stared, surprise flashing across his face. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. Erin followed her sister. Standing between her and the man, her body was calm, but her muscles were tense. She looked like she was ready to strike. The fake officer touched a small button behind his ear and said, "Confirmed sighting." Jace didn't wait. He raised his blaster and fired once, hitting the man in the leg. The man dropped with a cry. But before he could speak again, Erin moved like lightning. She slammed him to the ground, one claw pressed against his throat. Jace grabbed what supplies he could. "We have to go, now," he shouted. Luma nodded and grabbed his hand. For a moment, she looked at him with big eyes and whispered, "You believe us now?" He didn't answer. But in his heart, he already knew they were not just pets, not just escaped property. They were something more. And the people who made them were still watching. The city below burned with neon lights. But Jace didn't stop to enjoy the view. He led the girls through narrow alleys, down rusted ladders, and into tunnels where no security drone dared to follow. The fake officer was still alive back at the room, but not for long. Someone would find him, and then they'd come harder. Faster. Every second counted now. The underground level of old Sector 12 smelled of rust and oil. Pipes hissed and metal groaned as Jace pushed open a broken hatch leading to an abandoned train station. It was dark, dusty, and forgotten, perfect for hiding. Erin scanned the room quickly before letting Luma sit. Jace sat across from them, breathing hard, his shirt soaked with sweat. He looked at Erin, her eyes alert even in the dark. "You fought like a soldier," he said, voice low. That wasn't normal. Erin didn't smile, didn't even blink. She said, "We were trained to survive," Luma added softly. "And obey." That word sent a chill through the air. Jace leaned forward, his voice steady. "Obey who?" Erin looked down for the first time. "We don't know names, only faces. Machines and pain." Luma took his hand slowly and closed her eyes. Jace didn't pull away, even though his skin tingled the moment she touched him. A sudden flash hit his mind, bright lights, cold floors, screaming, and metal arms pulling a young Luma away from Erin. He gasped and pulled back, breathing hard. "What was that?" he whispered. Luma looked sad. "I remember now," she said. "We weren't just tested, we were broken." Jace realized then that the girls had some kind of power, not just memory, but something deeper. When they touched, they shared pieces of themselves. Erin stood up and pointed to a cracked wall. "Behind that is a safe tunnel," she said. "We went through it once before they caught us again." Jace helped her push the wall aside, revealing a tight passage filled with wires and dust. As they crawled through, his mind kept spinning. These girls had been made, trained, tested, but something had gone wrong. They had escaped, survived, and now they were with him. They reached a hollow space lit by glowing mushrooms growing from the walls. A strange warmth filled the air, and Luma seemed to relax. She curled up beside Erin and whispered, "He's kind." Erin didn't reply, but her eyes softened slightly. Jace sat with his back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. He didn't plan for any of this. He just saw two frightened souls in a cage and couldn't walk away. But now it was bigger, deeper. He had questions, and he needed answers. He pulled out an old device from his pack, one his father had left him years ago. It was a scanner, old but still working. He asked Erin to show the mark on her neck again. She hesitated, then nodded. The scanner beeped and flickered with strange symbols. Jace stared at the screen, confused. One of the codes matched a forgotten project tag from a now-dead company. The company his father once worked for. His heart sank. Project NACO Genetic Adaptives. The screen flashed. Jace dropped the scanner, his hand shaking. This wasn't just random. His family was somehow tied to this. Erin's voice cut through his thoughts. "You know the mark?" He nodded slowly. "My father. He worked on secret tech before he died." Erin looked straight into his eyes. "Then you're part of this too." Before Jace could respond, a sharp buzzing sound came from outside the tunnel. It was faint but growing louder, like wings made of metal drones. Erin grabbed Luma and pulled her behind a wall. Jace drew his blaster and crouched low, heart pounding. One of the walls lit up with a red beam, scanning through the cracks. Luma whispered, "They found us." The drone hovered just outside, its scanner flashing faster. Erin placed her palm on the stone wall and whispered something in a language Jace didn't understand. The wall shimmered briefly, and the scan passed through harmlessly. Jace stared in shock. "What did you just do?" Erin didn't answer. Instead, her eyes glowed brighter, and for the first time, Jace saw it clearly. She wasn't just built to obey or survive. She was made for something much more. The alarm lights flickered red, but no sound followed. That made it worse. It meant someone didn't want noise, just blood. Jax crouched near the edge of the walkway, peeking over the railing at the guards moving below. He counted 4 of them, all wearing black armor and no insignias. Not station security, not bounty hunters. These were cleaners, the kind sent to erase problems, not solve them. The catgirls were tucked behind a pile of scrap metal in the dark. Nini clung to his coat, her tail wrapped tightly around her leg. Sova kept her arms around both girls, eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. Lyra didn't speak, but her hands gripped a broken pipe like it was a weapon. They didn't tremble anymore. They were learning what it meant to run, hide, and survive. Jax whispered low, "We can't stay here." They nodded, no questions asked. In the distance, one of the guards lifted a scanner and shouted, "Thermal spike detected." Jax cursed it under his breath and motioned them to move. They slipped through the pipes like smoke, their small bodies used to tight spaces. Jacques followed last, his back burning with each breath, the scar reminding him this was not the first time. He ran with others depending on him. They entered a service tunnel lit by red emergency lights. The walls dripped with condensation, and every footstep echoed like a scream. Jacques moved ahead to check the path while the girls waited behind an old control panel. Suddenly, a voice buzzed through a speaker in the wall. Unauthorized bioforms detected in Sector 9. Shoot on sight, Nini gasped and covered her mouth. Sova pulled her close and whispered in her ear, but Lyra looked up at Jacques and said, "They will never stop, will they?" Jacques paused, meeting her eyes. "No," he said, "not until we're either gone, or they are." They ran again, deeper into the maze of the station. Jacques led them toward an old docking bay he remembered from his soldier days. It had been sealed off years ago, full of broken ships and forgotten cargo. But he knew one thing: no one patrolled the dead zones. Not even the mercs by the time they reached it. The girls were coughing, covered in dust. Jacques broke the lock with a metal rod and pushed open the heavy gate. Inside, the bay stretched into shadows. Full of silence and old memories, he found an old cargo crate and led them inside, sealing the doors tight. For now, they were safe. They sat in the dark, breathing quietly. Then Sova whispered, "Why are they hunting us so hard?" Jacques lit a dim lamp and looked at the girls one by one. "You weren't just sold for meat," he said. "You were sold to hide something." The girls exchanged looks. Jacques pulled a tablet from his bag and showed them the symbol he found on Nini's neck, a circle with 3 lines through it. "Blacken Labs," he said. "Illegal research, banned years ago. They created weapons. Not just soldiers." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "Do you think we're weapons?" Jacques didn't answer right away. He could still hear the drone scan echoing in his ears. The way the beam bounced off their skin like it couldn't read them. The way Aaron had made a scanner fail just by touching the wall. They were more than girls, more than survivors. They were something the galaxy wasn't ready to face. "No," he said at last. "I think you're miracles." They didn't speak, but the silence between them changed. It was no longer fear, it was understanding. Outside, the sound of heavy boots marched past the sealed gate. Jacques turned off the lamp and held his breath. Through the thin metal, he could hear a voice say, "They won't get far. They're just merchandise." He clenched his fists and whispered, "No, they're not." And if he had to prove that to the whole galaxy, he would, one step at a time, one fight at a time. The stars outside didn't blink, but Jacques did. His vision blurred from lack of sleep as he stared out the cracked window of the old ship's bridge. He hadn't flown in years, not since the war, but his hands still remembered every switch, every lever, every warning light. It all came back. The girls were silent behind him, watching as he worked. They had followed him into the ship hidden in Dock Bay 13, a forgotten freighter buried under rust and old codes. It had no name anymore, just a number on the hull. But to Jacques, it was their best chance. He was going to fly them out, off the station, out of reach, and into the unknown. Sova stepped forward, her voice careful. "Where are we going?" Jacques didn't look at her, his fingers tapping commands into the console. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Is that a real place?" Lyra asked quietly. Jacques finally turned around, meeting her eyes. "It has to be," he said, "or we make it real." The engines coughed to life, groaning like old giants. Lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. But the ship was still breathing. The girls moved closer, their ears twitching at every sound. Nini stayed nearest to Jacques, her eyes locked on him like he was the only steady thing in the universe. But before they could lift off, the console flashed. Red, access denied, external lockdown active. Jacques slammed his hand against the panel. "Damn it," he whispered. They had found them outside. The hangar gate clanked as heavy boots echoed again. Voices barked orders, weapons were drawn. "They're sealing the bay." Jacques muttered, "We're out of time." Sova stepped forward. gripping the broken pipe like it was a blade. "We can fight," she said, her voice trembling but strong. Jock shook his head. "No, not like this." He rushed to a lower deck, the girls close behind. He tore open a side panel and yanked out the backup fuse, then rewired the main power core directly to the engine spark system. The ship screamed in protest, but the lights surged again. A dangerous bypass, but it would break the lock, just. For a moment, the ship jolted and the floor shook. Outside, guards started pounding on the hull, yelling for surrender. "Hold on to something," Jock shouted, flipping the launch switch. The engines roared, and the old freighter blasted forward, tearing through the magnetic lock like a knife through paper. Metal scraped, alarms screamed, but the stars opened wide before them. The ship shot out of the docking bay just as a blast hit the rear hull. They spun through the darkness, tumbling, but alive inside the cabin. The girls were thrown to the floor. Jock steadied the controls, leveling them out as sparks flew from the side panels. Then silence, only the hum of space and the beat of 4 fast hearts. They made it. For now, they were out. Jock slumped in the pilot's chair, breathing hard. The girls got up slowly, bruised but safe. Nini crawled up beside him, placing her small hand on his. "You saved us," she whispered. Jock looked at her and shook his head. "No," he said, "you saved me. The day you looked at me like I was more than just human." Lyra looked out the window, her tail flicking gently. "What now?" Jock leaned forward and opened the nav system. He typed in a set of coordinates, one he never thought he'd use again. "Now," he said, "we find a place they can't follow." Sova tilted her head. "Does that place really exist?" Jock smiled faintly. "It will once we build it." The stars stretched before them, a map of chances and dangers. They had no plan, no supplies, and no backup. But they had each other, and that was more than most had in this cold galaxy. The silence of space was broken by fire, not from outside, but within. A warning light screamed across the console as black smoke poured from the rear of the ship. Jock jumped from his seat, coughing, reaching for the extinguisher. The girls shouted behind him, trying to stay low. One of the power cells had cracked from the damage during launch. The old freighter was barely holding together. Jock opened the access panel and blasted the smoke with foam. The sparks died, but the damage was done. He returned to the bridge, face covered in ash. "We lost half engine control," he said. "We're flying blind." Sova stood over the nav map, her ears flattened. She pointed at a nearby asteroid cluster, blinking on the screen. "We can hide there," she said. "Maybe land if it's hollow." Jock nodded, checking the fuel. "One shot, and we're gliding." Lyra helped Nini strap in, gently brushing ash from her cheeks. None of them cried, not anymore. They had cried enough already. Jock gripped the controls and aimed for the largest asteroid. The ship groaned like it was screaming, but it held. They drifted into the shadows of the rock, slipping out of sight, inside the asteroid. Jock guided the ship into a narrow tunnel. Light flickered as walls passed close on both sides. Then they found it an old mining base, long abandoned. He set the ship down hard, scraping the landing gear, but it didn't crash. It was enough. They had shelter. The air inside the base was thin but breathable. Lights flickered to life when Jock hotwired the panel. Dust danced in the beam of their lamps as they explored. There were beds, lockers, old tools, ghosts of miners who left in a hurry. It wasn't home, but it was quiet. And quiet was gold. That night Jock sat alone, sharpening a metal rod into a blade. The girls slept nearby, curled together on the old bunk, their breathing soft, tails tangled. He couldn't sleep. His body was tired, but his mind was burning. He thought about the bounty still out there. The slavers, the soldiers, the ones who wanted them back, not for rescue, but for control. Then he heard it. A sound, faint, distant, but real. Engines. He grabbed his scanner and ran to the top deck. A ship, small, fast, military grade, had entered the asteroid field. No lights, no signal, but it was scanning. They had been followed. Jacques ran back and woke the girls. "No time," he said. "They found us." Sova grabbed the pipe she always carried. Lyra held Nini's hand, and Nini clung to Jacques, her eyes wide but silent. The mining base had old defense turrets dead now, but still connected. Jacques rewired them in under 5 minutes, adrenaline racing through his fingers as the enemy ship lowered toward the asteroid. The turrets sparked to life. The first blast hit the rock, shaking everything. The second shot came from Jacques' turret, slamming the attacker with a sharp burst of plasma. A firefight exploded in the sky, inside. The base shook with every impact. The girls took cover, but Jacques didn't stop firing. He fought like he had nothing left to lose, because in truth, he didn't. All he had were them. And that was everything. Then came a crack. A beam tore through the ceiling, and Lyra screamed. A metal shard had hit her leg, and she fell to the ground. Nini rushed to her side, tears finally returning to her eyes. Sova picked up a broken panel and used it as a shield. Dragging Lyra back, Jacques turned from the turret, ran to them, and lifted Lyra in his arms. The turret fired one last shot before the panel blew. The enemy ship lost power and crashed into the asteroid wall. The fight was over for now. Jacques carried Lyra to the med bay and sealed the door. The wound wasn't deep, but it bled too much. He worked fast, hands shaking, patching the wound with old supplies and cloth. Lyra opened her eyes and whispered, "I didn't want to leave you." "You won't," Jacques said, voice rough. "Not while I'm breathing." Later, as the base fell silent again, Sova looked at him and asked, "How do you keep fighting like this?" Jacques didn't answer right away. He looked at Lyra, asleep but safe, Nini curled up beside her, and Sova standing strong despite it all. Then he said, "Because you're not things. You're not cargo. You're not for sale. You're mine now, and I don't let anyone take what's mine." The courtroom was quiet, too quiet for a place so full of life. Aliens of every kind filled the seats, tall ones with eyes like mirrors, short ones with skin like bark. Even the judges looked strange, sitting high above in their silver robes, faces hidden behind glowing masks, but all eyes were fixed on one figure in the center, a human, tired and scarred, standing tall, holding the hand of a small cat girl beside him. Jacques didn't wear a uniform, didn't carry a weapon, but his voice, when he finally spoke, cut through the silence like a blade. "They were sold for meat," he said, "chained, beaten, labeled like packages. They had names before you gave them numbers, dreams before you gave them cages." Gasps echoed through the room. He motioned for the girls to come forward, and they did. Sova first, proud and unshaken, then Lyra, limping slightly but holding her head high, and finally Nini, still small, still quiet, but no longer afraid. They stood beside him, not behind him. "This is not about law," Jacques said. "It's about what's right." He tapped a button on his old tablet, and a projection appeared in the air. Images of cages, bloody floors, and terrified eyes. Voices played laughter, auctions, commands, pain. Then came images of the girls free, smiling, helping each other. Then footage from the asteroid. Jacques shielding them with his body, fighting for them, bleeding for them. "Is this the galaxy you want?" he asked, "one where a child must beg to not be eaten?" No one answered, not a single judge moved. Then a soft voice broke the silence, Nini's. She stepped forward and held out the collar she had once worn. She said only 2 words, "Not meat." The room didn't cheer, it didn't erupt, it just breathed. Something shifted, quiet but clear. A slow, heavy voice spoke from the center judge's mask. "The court recognizes these individuals as sentient beings. Their sale, capture, or harm will be treated as a crime. They are free." The words echoed like thunder. Sova blinked fast, her hands shaking. Lyra turned to Jacques and whispered, "Did we win?" He smiled softly. "No," he said, "we just began." Outside the court, crowds gathered, some curious, some angry, some inspired. But the girls didn't look at them. They only looked at Jacques as he knelt down and asked gently, What do you want to do now? Sova said, help others like us. Lyra said, build a place for the broken. And Nini hugged him tight and said, stay with you. Jock stood and nodded. They had come from cages and shadows. Now they had light. Names, choices, and most of all a family. In the days that followed, they traveled again, not to run, but to reach others. They found more girls in chains, more lost ones in the dark. And they gave them names, blankets, food, and something rare, hope. No one who saw them could believe it. A human and 3 alien girls walking into slaver camps, with nothing but old tools and fire in their eyes. But they did it anyway, again and again, because they weren't meat, they weren't things, they were survivors, fighters and family. And Joxy was no hero. He was just a man who said no, and never stopped saying it.